be your single chair today. We have C2, Ethiopian government, known as Swearing and Muhammad Muhammad. For opening opposition, we have UPM2, Haikal and closing government, UPM1, Eric and Malaya. And for the closing opposition, we have CIT, that's Civil Institute Technology, Jennifer and John. Is that how you pronounce it? Without further ado, I'm sure everyone's ready. I'd now like to invite the government to open this debate. Yeah. You can speak from the front of where you're standing. That's seated. Oh, but it's actually positions. Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Good day, Lady Speaker, and the meticulous timekeeper, and to the members of the floor. Today we are going to debate about this House will not make father liable for child support if they requested the woman to have an abortion. I, as the first speaker, will find the motion together with the providing mechanism, and followed by my deputy who will be enforcing my points. Okay, let's talk about nowadays. We are talking about equality nowadays, and why not? In our house, the point of view is why we are focusing more towards men in sense of child support. Why we are stereotyping in a way, like we are putting them in spot. So right now, what our house is trying to say is we would not want to point out to the man all the time. We would like to have an equal share in father and mother. So before that, I would like to define it, the motion itself. So we will go for the liable. Liable means what the house is trying to say is responsible or be in charge. And child support means that giving financial support or providing all that it needs for the child needs for their development. And abortion means in the ending a life through a certified medical process. So our stance is this house will not make the father liable for child support if they requested the woman to have an abortion because it's not practical. That's our stance. And then for moving on to my point is why we should not make the father liable for child support if the father requested the woman to have abortion is because economically women nowadays they can handle themselves because right now we could see that women they are having their careers, they are moving forward in career-wise and education-wise. They have their own support in a way that saying that they are providing a strong background for them to move forward. And then economically, if we focus more, let's say that men should give the child support, men should provide for the child. It's like we are putting burden towards men. It's like because man is the head of the family, or man is it's like the main responsible for the child. So it's like we should ask for the child support. And nowadays, men also, besides women, men also they're having a lot of responsibilities in sense of they have to handle in sense of work. They also work like how women are working. They also work and they have to handle a lot of things, and they have to pay for their bills, pay for the household chores, and they have to give money for their women. So if we ask for them to give child support, it's like we are putting a lot of pressure on them. It's like the women are we are giving like less pressure to the women. Okay, before that, yes, ma'am.
What about underage women who are pregnant as a result from consented sex and they cannot provide for themselves enough for them?
So for them, we could just give them. That is why we should give them. Our government would like to give them some providers or give them some houses, shelters. That's why we have a lot of shelters for them, so that these underage women who got pregnant, they could fend for themselves, or they could have the support through these shelters created by the government on this. And then it's like when when you do not focus on, like how to say, if we focus too much on men to give this support, the woman will become more dependent, and they will be like, they'll be thinking that as the man is the one who's providing the child support, so it's like we do not need to focus too much on the child's empowerment and so on, and then they will be like depending too much. They will be like asking too much for the men, so it will be like there won't be any share in sense of responsibility. So if we make sure that the child, the father will not have a child support, so it's like so when we make sure that the father is not liable for child support, it's like we are making sure that there will be an equal share between those two. So in that sense, I would like to rest my case. Thank you.
Effectively, now invite the leader of opposition to go for the opposition.
The government bench assumes that women now live in a patriarchal, free society where you don't have stigma for being a single mother. We of the opposition side believe that's not so. Though we agree that in terms of consent, that even though the father consented to the sex and not to having the child, we still believe that allowing the father to opt out without any form of responsibility, it puts high risk towards the mother and also towards the child in which she's caring for those 18 years, right? We believe that in this instance, we cannot allow the father to opt out willy-nilly. We agree to the fact that they are suffering from both sides, but in this instance, the mother does have to bear the burden greater than the father, because not only does she have to care for the child, but she has to look into other aspects. For instance, in terms of social mobility, whether or not she wants to further her career as well. Not only that, on raising the child in a particular manner, right? We believe that all these kinds of burden put together will put the mother in a severe disadvantage, right? Because we have to look in terms of, in this instance, right, ladies and gentlemen, where these women would not opt for abortion because of very obvious of certain reasons, right? Because we have to look at the stigma in which make these mothers want to keep the children in the first place, right? These fathers in the first place have the option of opting out without this kind of policy to begin with, right, ladies and gentlemen? So we believe that they don't face the same kind of physical and emotional scars in which the father has to bear compared to which the mother has to bear compared to the father, right? Because we still believe that there is a form of duty of care solely on the fact that the father did contribute to the biological makeup of the child. So there is some form of responsibility, right? Because we have to look in the instance of within status quo. More often than not, mothers who would keep their children in these instances are mothers who are below the average income, or more often than not, mothers who are underage. So they don't have the same kind of economical benefits in which the opening government assumes, right, ladies and gentlemen? Because if we couple these kinds of particular instances, right, there is greater harm, right? So I'll go with the rebuttals dealing with the government side, right? For one, they say that in terms of equality, this is the reason why we should support this kind of stance. We believe that's not so. Even if the father doesn't have to, even if the father is able to pay, right? He doesn't necessarily need to take care of the child as compared to the mother, but that solely depends on the father. If the father is looking for more emotional benefits when it comes to raising a child, that's not stopping on our side, right? On their side, they're saying that the father doesn't have some form of responsibility or any kind of duty of care where the father is able to opt out or in essence disappear just like that, ladies and gentlemen. At the very least, in our stance, in worst case scenario, or the very least, the father only gives child support in terms of monetary funds, right? We believe that at the very least, it's capable of lessening the burden of the mother in which she's able to provide for the child, in this instance, sit down. At best, the father can participate more on our stance as well, because we're ensuring, because there's nothing preventing the father from participating more to take care of the child in our stance as well. Now, on their point on which women are economically well off in this instance, I already pointed out that societal stigma is there, where you limit the social mobility of women, right? Particularly those who are below the average income or within the average income strata, right, ladies and gentlemen, where these women have to juggle, the stresses of having to pay certain bills as well, and also pay for the upbringing of the child. We believe it severely limits the capabilities of these women to go out and experience life to its fullest, right? So in this instance, we have to look at the advantages and the disadvantages when it comes to being a single parent within this instance, right? Where you limit the ability of the mother because that she's not able to fully to be able to explore certain career options without having any kind of aid. We do acknowledge that there are other avenues such as shelters and other forms of avenues such as shelters and other NGOs, right? But we still believe that's not enough. We believe that if the father is capable of providing monetary funds as well, he is also able to play a greater part in the upbringing of the child as well on our stance, because he's obliged to. Yes.
Are you saying that mothers are not capable to climb the social ladder with the existence of children?
Yeah, we understand that we have to acknowledge the detrimental harms when it comes to being a single mother, right? We do acknowledge there are some instances where there are single mothers who are capable of juggling work and bringing up a child, right? But that's not something which you can just blanket it to all women, right? Because if we look at, for instances, women within the average income strata or those who are below the average income strata, they do face that kind of discrimination when it comes to being a single mother within that part of society, solely because there are conservative ideologies which are circulated within that particular society, right? It does limit her capabilities with interacting with people, because now she's seen as being she is stigmatized because she is bringing up a child by herself. The reason why we say that having a father in some cases participating in this lessens that kind of stigma is because now you do have someone at least participating in parenting, right? We acknowledge it is a form of patriarchy. At the very least, ladies and gentlemen, these women it would lessen these burdens of these women, because she is able to tackle that kind of societal stigma, right? Because at the end of the day, we have to look in terms of the fact of whether or not we should allow this kind of risk to allow this kind of race to be applied not only on the mother but as well as the child, something that will be explained by my second speaker. We acknowledge the fact that in instances where there is sex, that people only consent to the part of having sex, right? But if we allow this kind of irresponsibility to take place, where you don't have any kind of accountability when it comes to rape of the child after these kinds of instances, right, ladies and gentlemen, you're putting the child and the mother at greater risk because of the fact that they have to solely live out their lives without any form of other incentives, without the father taking part, right? So with that, we strongly oppose. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are debating about whether fathers should or should not be liable for child support if they request for abortion. Okay, let's look at the status quo now. Okay, yeah, sure. Men are obligated to provide child support, but to rebut the leader of opposition's point, I would say the man has the right on his own finance. Okay, you can see that it's the man's right for his own money because his money is his choice. So in the US, we have cases where during one night stands, these women have been requesting from the men who made them pregnant to provide constant child support in monetary value, which in a prolonged time, it manages to make the man loses his finance because these women have exploited men for over time to provide child support in monetary value for these women. So this exploitation of men from his wealth due to the women's frequent requests from the child support scheme really degrades the man from his responsibilities. Yes.
If the woman has to provide everything else for the child, why at the very least can't the man provide monetary fund?
Thank you. Okay, Okay, it's actually both their blame because yes, the man has made the woman pregnant and of course he has to provide child support. But if the woman herself choose to accept the child, and yes, just like my prime minister has said, if the woman chooses herself and she believes in her finance, she can take care of the child. Okay, moving on to my point. Um, by this exploitation of women of men with their wealth to provide child support, it adds more burden if the man is living with a low paying job because the low life standards that request him um, to constantly look for jobs which can support him, but even he cannot support himself. So why should he be responsible for something that could degrade him of his wealth and of his responsibilities of his life? Okay, in the case of one night stand, okay, just imagine this. If the woman, we have cases where the woman wants to have sex with the man, but the man was, let's say the man was drugged. So it's actually the woman's choice to have the child. And the man doesn't have responsibility towards the child. So why do you expect this man to pay for the expenses for the child support? It's actually unfair for the man because we have cases where the women themselves are deranged. I mean, they really want the child, but the man doesn't want. So the man has been put a burden on his shoulders to bear for the child, whereby he didn't even want, he didn't have the intention and the need or the desire to bear the child. Okay, moving on to my point. Okay, these women, if they constantly ask for child support, they are abusing the system for their own benefits. Because we have cases where the women, they know that this man has a job that is of high pay. So, in order to increase the woman's life life standards, they again, they exploit the man from their wealth. They manipulate them through I mean, they really convince the man that it's your responsibility because you have made me pregnant, and in order for you to pay your responsibility, you should provide full child support to me. So, if the man did not want the child in the first place, he should not take care for the child expenses. And once again, the government would like to reinstate that each man has his own right for his finance because man has to hold a lot of burden as prescribed by the generals. They have to take care of the wealth, the finance of his family, and the man has to really work hard in order to maintain his living standards, and not just you can say that the woman also works, but in this modern in this avant-garde era, you can see that we have more women working in higher sectors because yes, feminism has really empowered women to work in these offices with high ranks, so the women can themselves provide their own child support for their children. So, no, thank you. So the man doesn't really have to have responsibility to have his finance to be put up for the child support if he doesn't want, and if he requested abortion. With that, the government rests this.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. I invite the media to lead a conversation.
Ladies and gentlemen, in an ideal world, we'd like to believe that all single mothers are capable of providing everything for the child, right? Even monetary fundings, right? But that's not the case, right? Because not all women, like what the government has expressed you and has painted a picture for you, are of this, even of a middle class, or even of the upper class, let alone middle class, right? Some of them are, like mentioned by my previous speaker, are those people who are unable to fend for themselves, like underage mothers who do not even have the proper credibility or prerequisite to opt for more, right? Or people from conservative countries or third world countries, these single mothers who do not have any other options besides monetary fundings from the fathers, right? So this is why I believe that the government side is very dismissive on that part, right? So before I move on to my substantives, a few rebuttals, right? First one is how they mentioned on the exploitation of these mothers when they ask for monetary fundings from the fathers, right? We believe on the opposition side that having a child is not exploitation, right? Because the money that they're asking for from the father is not for themselves, it's for the children, right? Because they have already agreed to, they have already been obligated to fend for the whole family, for the child, right? They have to provide everything else, their time, their energy, and have to work and dismiss the fact that they are capable to do more, but then at the stakeholders is such that their children are at stake here, right? So they have to consider the fact that they have to provide for the children. So we believe that by asking for monetary fundings from the father is not exploitation, right? Yes, we concede to the fact that the father only consented on the sex, but not the child, right? But to a certain extent, they have to understand that having the child is still a part of his responsibility because it resulted from his consented sex. So he should have to be obligated to provide for the fundings, right? So in cases where women can't even fend for themselves, right, we see how this is more of a burden to these women when they don't have any other options to provide for the children. Right? They can't even fend for themselves when they can't opt out for higher jobs. We see how this is very detrimental, right, to the family, and also not only to how the mothers have to work, right? We see how this is also a burden and harmful to the child when they have to go through life without a father figure. Right? So this is where I'm going to move on with my substantives, right? No, thank you. Okay, so my substantives is in the place of the child, right? How is this detrimental and harmful for the child when the father does not provide any monetary fundings, right? So I'm going to give you two situations on how I'm going to paint this picture of what we on the opposition side are proposing, right? We on the opposition side have considered that we are not stopping the father from wanting to involve himself to involve themselves. It is up to the father. We think that it's okay for them to want to involve themselves, right? So if the father chooses to partake in some form of involvement, emotional development, if he is able to be present for the child or have some form of joint parenting in that sense, right? We see that if he is able to do that, right? In one sense that, we see how the government side take that the father the father can provide a little bit more than just monetary funding towards the child, right? But in the case where the father chooses to opt out of this relationship, right? When he doesn't want to have anything to do with them, when he feels like he wants the mother to provide for these children wholly, right? We see this is a burden on several levels, right? First, on how it is a stigma on the child's perspective, right? When they're being discriminated by not only the public, right? Imagine if they go to school and they have their teachers or their children or the peers having to ask them every time why they don't have a father, right? Why are their father not present? Why are they, taking after their mother's last name, right, for example? We see, especially in perception of child out of wedlock and single mothers, even in the US, are still very harmful, are still very negative. Much less people in the third world countries or in the conservative regions, right, where people are more skeptical of single mothers and child out of wedlock, right? So how about underage mothers who do not have credits or prerequisites to opt for more, right? Like, the picture picture that has been painted by the government side is that all mothers are able to find a career, or are able to afford this kind of lavish lifestyle, or are able to provide enough for the children. But that's not the case, right? We see that we are being more realistic on not centering only this group of mothers, but also mothers of different social classes, right? So the second element of the child is going to be affected, right? You see that it's emotionally deteriorating for the child, that the child will feel that they do not have a father figure, right? The father does not provide emotionally, that is not present most of the time, does not want to partake in any other involvement, does not want to, domestically, the child have joint custody with the child, right? The very least he should provide for the child is a monetary funding. So at least the child would feel like, yes, my father is an ass, but I can, at least he provides us money for me to be able to eat, or be able to afford education, for example, or tuition, or go to college in the future, right? So we see how this is also detrimental, not only for the mothers, but also the child, because as a child growing with a single mother, right? It is not only detrimental from the social stigma part. Growing up with very less funding, very less, having father that does not provide for you, having very least to depend on, and what more, no father present emotionally, right? When the child feels like they are missing a father figure, right? So at least, at the very least, the father should provide this subsidy, or this option, right? Monetary funding to provide basic the mothers that are off burden and the children, right? So we see that having a child is not exploitation. Asking for a monetary funding is for the betterment of the child and not for the mothers to exploit. With that, I'm proud to close. Thank you.
I invite member of the. Yeah.
Consent, and also consent for you to have sex. We think that consent for you to have sex with your partner does not mean you already give a consent for you to have. That's the logic that comes in. That look, if sex always lead to have a children, but we don't think it works that way, because role for you as a husband is also different from your role as a father. Because we think that if you also need to say you have a children when you get married, or when you become a husband, we think this is unfair for family who decided not to have children in the first place. So coming from opposing government, firstly, I'm going to talk about the liability of fathers, how fathers has more duty of care over these children. Secondly, why we think that how it has more choices on family planning, and lastly, about the idea of marriage and stuff. But before that, couples of rebuttal on opening opposition idea. Firstly, on the idea of issues of minor and underage people. Right? Firstly, we think that usually the child that bear by this underage couples is usually resolved as a negligence. Because even if that sex was consented, we think the bearing of the children itself is not something that has a consent coming from both parties in the first place. Which is an decision the underage fathers bear responsibility over the children. We think it is much more worse if you put the liability on these underage parents, because one, they don't have the experience of capability to actually cater to the needs of the children themselves. We think it's much better for you to send this underage mother to the healthcare center, which is much more a better avenue in the second place. Secondly, when we are actually saying that father is not liable, does that open more rooms for father to opt out in a marriage system, right? No. Without that, they need to establish and tell us that this father actually has a duty of care over the children, right? If the opposition talk about that this father actually consent to have sex, therefore, or they also bear the obligation over the result of it. We don't think so, because the decision that is needed to actually have a children and the decision to make sex with your partners is two different consent that you need in the first place. Because that's why in a family planning that we have the preventive pills and those kind of things. So even if you do sex, so you can also prevent to have the children. Because in this situation, that you also need to consider that father already consented not to have children even if they have sex, but the mother still wanted to bear the children in the first place. Right? Even if they say it's burdening the mother, we think it's okay because father already told the mother that we don't want to have, they don't want to have the children in the first place. Family planning and the marriage in the end of it. Thirdly, but they say, look, that the father is involved in the family, therefore it's a liability to have a problem. We think it's much more problem because you also create a stereotype in society that when you get married, you need to have a children in the first place. Right? We think that should not happen. Why? Because there's also a different things, right? Because you also plan your marriage, how many children that you wanted to consider, your financially just doesn't have a choice, even if it's resolved the formation of baby. You will need to differentiate that how your effects on your side is actually much more detrimental as compared to people who don't even have parents to begin with. Because we think that people who don't actually can survive and live or suffer harms. But we think that actually live happy in the end of the obligations of the parents have, because we have the obligation and responsibility that we think that a form of consent needs for you to seek from both sides to have a children in the first place. Right? We think even if you get married or having sex with other people, it does not mean that you actually consent to have a children with that people. Right? We think that's another form of option to begin with. Even if the act of sex does contribute to the formation of children, but we don't think that the consent requires consent in the first place, right? Because we think that the idea of family planning that fathers seek for, because fathers look for the risks and the chances for them, a good development of children to raise their children. Because father decided, say that look, this environment is not suitable for us to have children. Therefore, father already told mothers that look, you should abort the baby. Right? Even if abortion is a choice of women, I'm gonna explain why in this situation, abortion no longer an only option for women in the end. Because we think that the idea of abortion itself in this situation should also, the fathers can also interfere with the mother's choice of having abortion. Why is that? Because we think that the idea of abortion, that whether you wanted to bear the baby, to have the babies in the end, you also need to hear the father's opinions on this sense, right? Yes.
Yes. In the event where the mother also consented to not having a child and she still has to bear that kind of problem, please mention why is it fair for the father to opt out just like that?
Look, we think it's everything. When the mother is not consented to have a baby, we don't think that's a problem because the baby will be aborted anyways, right? But we think that even if you say that abortion is the choice of women, we think that in this situation, father also can also interfere with the rights of women over their own bodily autonomy and vice versa. Because we think this, when fathers be allowed to have a voice, they encourage mutual obligations, right? There's a parental role that each party need to play in the first place. Because we think that even if the body belongs to women, but we think the child and bear has no should also have the rights, and the rights to raise their kids should also fall on the fathers in the first place. Because in the end, fathers and mothers, both sides are going to raise up their children in the end. Therefore, we tell you that how the father say is always a legit concern for him. And also, Paulo can also help to change the stereotype. When mothers couldn't afford to actually raise their baby, they're going to seek for fathers. We think this kind of stereotype needs to be changed, right? Because it shows how women are weak and cannot raise their own children in the first place. Right? Because we think the liability that has to actually grow up with children should actually come from the consent from both sides in the first place. We think that's much more important. Right? We also think that the idea of marriage itself should not only fall upon that look when you are becoming the husband and you are the wife, therefore you should have a baby in the end. Right? We don't think this is actually a good stereotype we need to create in society, because we think it's going to hamper the idea of marriage planning, the family planning in the beginning place. Because we think that how much child that you wanted to have is also coming concern from the fathers and mothers. Thank you.
As a member of the government, I'd like to invite the Minister of Opposition.
When women ask for child support, they call it abusive, but call it just when women are pushed towards abortion in fear of not getting child support. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the kinds of inequalities that we want to prevent in status quo. Coming from opening government, we see that there has been no goal. All they gave were band-aid solutions to women left behind by men due to their irresponsibility and their inability to participate in major decisions, especially when it comes to creating children that are part of society at the end of the day. They fail to address harmful perspectives that cause inequalities and are being tolerated by society. That's why, coming from closing opposition, we are the only team who will present to you a goal, and that is to encourage participation from both men and women in the course of gender equality. And why abortion in this case, at the moment that we make laws that tolerate irresponsibility and abolishing of child support, is harmful towards the road of gender equality, ladies and gentlemen. We also believe that we were the only side trying to achieve this goal, and through choosing what laws should be passed at the end of the day. Women's freedom to choose and children are taken hostage. Why exactly, ladies and gentlemen, are they victimized at this point of the debate? Because when you're going to be talking about children, you're punishing them by not giving them the kind of support that they need when this was something that was never their fault to begin with. So what is its correlation towards later events? You further create into the mindset of that certain child that, hey, certain genders are better than others, because why did my father leave me? Why did I not get the support? It creates it creates that kind of mentality among children at that very young age, that men and women cannot work together, ladies and gentlemen. And that kind of harmful perception is something we don't want to exist in the status quo to begin with. We believe, ladies and gentlemen, that all the argumentation of opening government was purely based on financial needs. Like, it's his money, it's his choice. However, ladies and gentlemen, it's still his sperm, so it's still his responsibility at the end of the day. You can't just correlate money to children, ladies and gentlemen, because more responsibility lies in creating future members of our society. In response to closing government's case, he was talking about the consent to sex and how it's different from consent to have a child. Conceded on that level, sir. But the harms of non-participation of men in the decision and raising up of that child is a greater harm than for you to give men the right not to support that child to begin with. Let's try to be comparative, ladies and gentlemen. You try to compare the harms caused by their right not to support the child. The harms are the following. You harm women's choices, which I will discuss later. You harm the children at the end of the day, which I discussed earlier. And all the more, you harm the kind of gender equality that we want to promote within the status quo. That's certainly not a bullet we want to bite just for men to have the right not to give up child support, ladies and gentlemen. We believe we're very strong in that case. The debate is not just whether or not men are liable or whether they or not they consent to giving support, but it includes larger principles that dictate societal norms within society. These are important principles that build the society that we have today. Now, why in the first point, ladies and gentlemen, how can we achieve gender equality, and where is the best paradigm to address this? Gender equality was something never touched by anyone in this debate. Gender equality is basically about both genders working together. Do not mistake us for people who are sexist and just promoting the rights of women. Because in gender equality, ladies and gentlemen, it calls for the support of both men and women, and that can be fostered through participation, through child support, through their active decision making within certain choices made by those certain individuals, ladies and gentlemen. It calls for the participation of both sexes, and allowing men to absolve themselves of responsibilities for child support is not supporting this cause, and is furthermore a backlash towards the gender equality that we want to promote, ladies and gentlemen. But let me give you examples as to how time and time immemorial society was able to achieve greater change when it comes to gender equality. Right? In 1970s, in the first wave of feminism, it was men who gave women the right to vote. The white ribbon movement was by Michael Kaufman, also a male. Philippine gender equality is working at its best despite the fact that majority of its officials are male individuals. It just goes to show that the active participation of men within society are important in shaping the kind of gender equality you want to promote in your nation. And that starts with you as the government approving certain laws and creating certain responsibilities among their perspectives of those individuals. And that's what they're trying to promote, because they're trying to promote a society where men are no longer involved in the development of that child. For God's sake, ladies and gentlemen, they're not just material things. These are things that require responsibility and shape the entire nation that we're currently living in. But why is this problematic? The moment that you allow side government to go on with their claim, like absolving responsibility on child support, why is this problematic in society? You reinforce the idea that men should not work together with females. You further strengthen the idea that, hey, only one sex should work in order to improve something. And that's something that's currently harmful within status quo and within the entire world. That's why the gender gap index is so different from country to country, because certain societal norms are dictated by the kinds of laws that the government are trying to promote. And if government promotes a law that is against giving child support, then of course societal perceptions will follow. It will become a societal norms that men will no longer be involved with women, and that's something that's harmful, ladies and gentlemen. That's the reason when it comes to liability, the moment that the sex is consensual, of course, whatever the outcome is, there should also be participation. If they're so participative in sex, then all the more there should be participative the moment a baby pops out of that kind of problem, right? Second, ladies and gentlemen, how the child is victimized with. I discussed this further earlier, right? But how does participation help alleviate the child being victimized in the status quo? It enables a child to value importance of both genders in building a society the moment that the government allows the men and mandates them to give off child support. Therefore, a child can see participation from both sexes, and that can influence the kind of behavior and the kind of outlook they have on the society that they're living in. Thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, it's about women's choice at the end of the day. Everybody knows this is a great ingredient when it comes to empowerment. However, we need to assess the choice at this point in time. Is it freely given, or is it under the threat of not receiving child support? Because why would they opt for abortion in this kind of debate, right? They are more likely to get abortion knowing that they will not get child support. Therefore, the choice that they make to abort that certain individual is now dictated by the threat that they will no longer receive any monetary support. They will no longer receive any form of support whatsoever from their male counterparts. And that's harmful. That's harmful in making your choices, because the woman will no longer choose over just because of bodily autonomy. The woman is now choosing under the threat of not being able to support their child. Because why would they want to support their child in the first place if no male counterparts gonna help them, ladies and gentlemen? In both scenarios, it both fails. In order, even if they can raise the child on their own, the policy discourages men to be involved, and that's a really great ingredient in gender equality. But lastly, ladies and gentlemen, regarding OG's mechanism, right? It puts burden on the government to provide for women because of men's inability to participate in raising a child. No harmful mentality is changed. At best, it is tolerated. Example, if government can barely give basic needs to individuals and minimum wage, how much more in supporting and providing child support? Practically, their mechanism cannot fly, and principally, they change no perception whatsoever. That's really harmful towards gender equality. Thank you.
Yeah. I can raise with the speech, but I'd like to advise leaders, please keep to the maximum time, 7:20, and include your speeches. Thank you very much. Now I invite the good speaker of the government.
raised by a single mother, even today, I am being empowered as a woman. And I feel that my mother, even a single mother, she was able to raise her children. If my mother decides to opt out because my father would not want this today, ladies and gentlemen, in the motion today, in the essence of today's motion, that this house will not make fathers liable for child support. If we requested for the woman to have an abortion, let's go to the rebuttals from the opening opposition today. Let's see what the leader of opposition has said today. The leaders of opposition today said that the fathers need to pay, but not necessarily need to care for the children. But contradictory to what the deputy leader of opposition said, that suddenly the fathers need to care for their children to come to their schools, and suddenly that these fathers need to also pay, but also needs to care. But also this actually clashes directly to what my member of the government has said, but that husbands does not necessarily mean has to be fathers. Let's say what the leader of opposition today. The leader of opposition today portrays that women are actually not capable of being single mothers, and this is very shameful to see. That they say that single mothers are not able to climb to the social. These children are going to limit this woman from moving up to the social ladder, and this will prevent this woman from moving up to the social mobility and prevent them being severely oppressed, and they cannot live life to the fullest. They say. I quote that from them, and they say that having children is a detrimental harm to women's life, and this is wrong, ladies and gentlemen. We have seen that single mothers have thrived in community and has shown and has proven and has already broken the stigma that single mothers cannot survive in this world, ladies and gentlemen. Now let's see what he has said. What causes irresponsibility? The leading opposition, they say that these fathers are actually irresponsible. We say that the mothers are irresponsible. Why do I say this? The consent of these parents, husbands, and also wives, they both have consent to be mothers and fathers. Now, what happens in the motion today? That the fathers are actually, the husbands do not want to be fathers, ladies and gentlemen. But in today's society, that you say that these husbands do not have the rights to opt out being being fathers, because you say they already. How are they irresponsible? But in the first place, they do not want to bear this responsibility itself. Moving on, the deputy leader of opposition again saying that fathers are obligated to provide, and they say that it's a burden to women because they cannot care for themselves, they cannot fend for themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the stigma they are doing today. They say they want to oppress the stigma. They want to break this stereotype. Then what happens today in the opening of opposition today? They say that these children, when they go to school, people will ask them, where are your fathers? And they say, hey, today, we must follow this stereotype today. They're not breaking the stigma. They say because of this peer pressure from other people, they are not correcting the stigma. We just should follow the stigma because they don't want these children to be development to be intervened with the social stereotype that is being applicated to them. Now we say on the opposition we say that we should empower women. We say that single mothers, they say that these children, even so if they don't have fathers, hey, look, I don't have a father. Even so my father is not supporting me financially or not supporting me morally, I still have my mother, and my mother is able to be a father and able to be a mother to me. Now let's see, moving on to the closing opposition. Before that, yes.
Unless the government chooses to impose a certain body that can help to fend for this group of mothers who are unable to provide for their family, right? You're not being realistic here. How do you think that they can climb the social ladder?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the problem with the opening of opposition today. They feel that our government are not helping single mothers, but readily we already have foundations. Please do your homework when you get home after this debate ends. Now let's see. Let's handle the closing opposition today. They say that they want to fight for gender equality, ladies and gentlemen. They say that they're the only one who wants to talk about gender equality, and they're the only ones who fight for gender equality. Let me tell you why actually in their paradigm they're actually going against gender equality, ladies and gentlemen. Again, clashing directly with what we just said. Husbands are not equal to fathers. I mean, husband does not necessarily need to be fathers. It means that when you opt into marriages, you don't necessarily need to have children. And why is it? It's a form of shame to gender equality, because you are saying that the fathers, nonetheless, whether they do not have a say to become a father or not, nonetheless, the men, whether the women want to have children or do not have children, they need to pay for their children. However, in our paradigm, the whole government bench paradigm, we say that yes, men have right to say, men have the rights to not want to be fathers, ladies and gentlemen. We say that if men want to opt out from being fathers, then it's okay. And that is the problem with women today who actually wants to become mothers without even having the consent from their husband, which actually goes directly clashes. In some family institutions, we see that families have family plannings. So in the first place, husbands and wives say, okay, let's not have a child till 20 years because I'm still not prepared to. But suddenly they have accidental sex, let's say that. So suddenly the woman is pregnant. But the man is actually not prepared to be a father. He's not prepared financially and not prepared mentally. So that's why he opted out, say, okay, let's abort first because we're not ready to be parents yet. But however, because the women have this instinct to be mothers, they say that I still want to have the children. So suddenly the fathers need to pay because of the choices that the women are having. Okay, that's one shame for gender equality. Now, how do we empower women in terms of our paradigm? We say that even so, if the fathers, let's say the fathers don't want to become a children, we want to empower you. We say that single mothers can thrive in this community. We say that it is not a form of gender discrimination because let's say in the paradigm of the person today, they want the participation of both sexes. Actually, in their paradigm, they're just only talking about parents who already have consent. The both husbands and wife have given consent to be parents. And today, this is why what they are saying do not actually apply to the debate today because they are only talking and merely talking about the participation of parents who already give consent. Well, today we are saying that the fathers who have requested, if in the first place they do not want to have a child, then why should they support for the child that they do not want instead? If they're not ready, we say we give time for them to be ready. It's not that we want these children, this wife to have abortion, but because in a family institution, what harms can it bring if the fathers are not ready yet? It brings more harm to these people. With that, I'd like to propose.
Alright, I thank the government and just which is the opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, we in opposition is not telling you that single mothers are indeed not important within society. We believe that single mothers are very much applaudable within society because they've actually given a single picture that they are very strong within the ground. But we think that the sad part there is that there's an exaltation of a particular gender, ladies and gentlemen. That women, for example, are greater in terms of providing support to their child, or men is greater financially supporting a child, ladies and gentlemen. We think that it singularly creates a picture that one gender is better of a parent compared to the other, ladies and gentlemen. We think that we in closing opposition enforces to you an idea that hey, we wanted equality within the ground. We wanted equality in terms of providing assistance within the family or within a child, ladies and gentlemen. We think that exaltation in itself coming from their side of the house is not anymore equality, ladies and gentlemen. We provide you with a basic understanding that say, for example, a man and a woman can participate in family building. For example, a woman can give emotional support to the child, for example, or the father can give financial support. It goes to show, ladies and gentlemen, that both gender in this debate or in our model gives to you an understanding that there's a uniform importance in their presence within that particular family, ladies and gentlemen, and not only actually judged by a particular gender at all, ladies and gentlemen. We think that the whole side of government, ladies and gentlemen, is creating to us a picture of patriarchy. Like say, for example, that men in this case has this greater choices of descent, for example, greater choices of consent, for example, towards a particular thing. They're trying to promote us that, you know what, women will always be on the receiving end of the choices of men, ladies and gentlemen. We think that it clearly values how they're going to achieve equality at the end of the day. because they're trying to tell us right now that women becomes leeches that actually does not take into account that we have a responsibility over a child. Thus, they're trying to tell us that women in itself are very much selfish in nature, ladies and gentlemen, that they always think within their own self rather than the child that they're supporting with, ladies and gentlemen. That is completely irrelevant within the debate, and that is actually not supporting any form of equality within society, which is actually sad, by the way, coming from government side, ladies and gentlemen. But let's try to accommodate the argumentation coming from opening government. The only contention that they have, Madam Speaker, is that, you know what, we put too much burden to men. That is their own idea. We think that that is a sad part in there because they're trying to create a picture of women that is evil within the ground. We think that that is not the case, ladies and gentlemen, because if we're going to look at burden, ladies and gentlemen, they fail to understand that women in this case is the most vulnerable sector, ladies and gentlemen, has this most sacrifices to give into when it comes to childbearing, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to carrying a child. Because you see, for example, the only thing that they think that the burden of men is financial, ladies and gentlemen. But what is it about the burden of women in this case, ladies and gentlemen? Women transition from becoming single, for example, to a kind of women, for example, who change in physical appearance when you give birth, ladies and gentlemen. You actually undergo a certain pressure within the community that you will not anymore become beautiful, for example, after giving birth, ladies and gentlemen, or your body changes in that particular process, ladies and gentlemen. We think the sacrifice in itself becomes more into women. Thus, we think that these things, when it comes to burden, ladies and gentlemen, both gender, male and female, has the same burden, ladies and gentlemen, in this debate. So we think from opposition, this should not be handled single-handedly, ladies and gentlemen, but actually a joint decision-making in both parts of the House. We think that we better forward the kind of understanding that both gender right now are trying to help each other into lessening their burden within trying to create a form of support to that child, ladies and gentlemen. But what is the main idea of closing government in this debate? They're talking to us that, you know what, it's all about the consent, ladies and gentlemen. If that particular man, for example, does not actually give a consent for you to have a child, ladies and gentlemen, then automatically it is legitimizing the choice of men to actually not support the child in the process. But you know what, ladies and gentlemen, we're not talking about prior actions, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about the effects of that actions already. Meaning to say that there is already a product of those certain actions, ladies and gentlemen, that was already happening on the ground. It's so faulty for you to dismiss the kind of responsibility this man should have to this child, for example, or to women, ladies and gentlemen. We are already debating upon the effects of these forms of action, ladies and gentlemen. So we think that the main issues in this debate is that, number one, to which models are we supporting gender equality? And second, what are the extents of the proposal within the debate? First, to which models are we supporting gender equality, ladies and gentlemen? Our extension is pretty much important because we think that there should be an integration among genders. We provided to you a picture of gender equality that is not insulting other gender, for example, ladies and gentlemen, for you to be able to empower them in a much case, ladies and gentlemen. Because we're not only talking about two parties here in this debate, we are already talking about the third party, which is the child, ladies and gentlemen. What will be the future of the child? How will the child perceive gender right now if single mothers only support them in a certain process, ladies and gentlemen? That's why my partner is very much important, because we talk to you why participation of men is pretty much necessary in child build-up, ladies and gentlemen. Let's take, say, for example, ladies and gentlemen, divorce in the United States of America. Even if there is an active choice between two partners, ladies and gentlemen, to separate with each other, it does not remove the liability of support to that particular individual. It tells you, ladies and gentlemen, that even in divorce, they've actually considered an importance to participation of men towards that particular family, ladies and gentlemen. Because we think that there's always a tendency of hatred going on, ladies and gentlemen. Like, say, for example, if my mother is the only one trying to support me, ladies and gentlemen, in most states in the United States of America, it kind of depicts a picture of men as evil within the society. Like, say, for example, a woman, for example, that has been raised by a single mother, ladies and gentlemen, considered a perception or enforces an idea of being a man-hater, ladies and gentlemen. We think that if we are going to actually give a solution to that vicious cycle of mentality that men is irresponsible, for example, we think that we enforces that in our side of the house by giving participation to both gender, ladies and gentlemen. So we actually try to control that particular vicious cycle of hating towards a particular gender because there was no presence, there was no support at all, ladies and gentlemen. When it comes to extent, we think that we better forward it to you in a same process. Why? Even if this particular side of the house will eventually become successful in their model, ladies and gentlemen, why is it that our model is or protecting women in the long process, ladies and gentlemen? Because in their side of the house, they're trying to create an image of women becoming sexual objects, ladies and gentlemen. That after men actually satisfy sexually with them or have sex with them, ladies and gentlemen, it's okay for them to dismiss or reject women in the process if there will be a baby coming out of the tummy, ladies and gentlemen. So regarding about how do we necessarily create gender equality and in terms of providing protection to women, I think that closing opposition is prouder to oppose in this debate. Thank you.
Right, at MIDP, we may